Love podcasts, hate nonsense. It's the Politics Show podcast, ladies and gentlemen.
Yay! It's actually the most enthusiastic when it's just Andrea and Ben.
Yeah.
That is a powerful audience combo.
Well, I think Sean gets a bit casual, you know?
Yeah.
A little bit entitled, perhaps.
He's actually not even here sometimes.
Yeah. Sometimes he doesn't even turn up. For shame. Yeah, no, I do enjoy it. It's like the old days. Maybe I'll start screaming the intro again.
That'd be good. I saw someone refer to us, you and I, this combo, as the platonic ideal.
Really?
Yeah, which I thought it was like a nice term for us.
Do you think there's a podcasting table in Plato's Wealth of the Forms? And is it shaped like this? And does it have these two boys sat behind it?
Absolutely. I like that. I think there should be names for each combination of the five of us, whatever number of combinations that is.
Well, usually it's Dudes Rock.
Yes.
It could become the platonic ideal.
But I would extend Dudes Rock to Sean.
Yeah. I guess platonic ideal, in some ways it is the platonic ideal because it's two white men in sort of young professional class, not in middle age yet, but certainly at the older end of the younger spectrum, you know, sort of millennial adjacent.
Yep.
Just on that sort of cusp, I think younger millennial. I'm not sure it's very Gen Z to have a podcast. Unless it's sort of inaudible and sort of crunchy and crackly. And
Or
it's
sort of TikTok first podcast.
It's a podcast, but each episode's 30 seconds long.
Yeah. Well, that's like Subway Take, isn't it?
So in that sense, it is the platonic ideal of a podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah. In its truest form. Where did you see that?
On the subreddit, someone made a meme I didn't quite get about Mario Kart, which I thought was just an invitation.
Oh, yeah, I approved that, yeah.
I think someone would just like you all to play Mario Kart with them.
Yeah, I thought that.
Which I endorse.
It was one of those, I approved it and then was like, wait, I'm pretty sure I saw some faces superimposed on the cover. I need to go back and check. Because I just see, yeah, it looked like someone was saying, oh, let's play Mario Kart together. I thought, oh, that's nice, approve. And then I was like, oh, no.
And then they suggested, someone said the platonic ideal, meaning you and I, should review it or...
What, the game?
Yeah. I don't think we should. I don't think it's a good idea. But
let's find a mechanism for like getting freebies. You know,
yeah, we'd really milked Pyatt for a bit, didn't we?
Yeah, that was great. Shout out Pyatt. Great clobber. Look, this could be you. This could be you if you send us the stuff.
Nintendo.
Yeah, I don't know. We occasionally do a podcast where we're just playing on like a PlayStation 70 or whatever.
You're keeping your ear to the ground in gaming news, aren't you?
What are we on, 5 now? Yeah, no, I've been out of the console gaming for a while. I've been out of gaming full stop for a while because of fatherhood. But very much waiting to get back into the water, you know, get in the driving seat. GTA 6 coming down the pipe.
I was never a GTA person.
Really?
No. It was a game I only really played at like someone else's house.
You weren't allowed it. 18 rated game.
I don't think I ever wanted it. You know, or when GT5 came out, I actually didn't really play games very much. There was a beautiful Halo Reach moment in my life.
Was there?
Yeah.
GTA
for 4 hours in a dark room.
GTA, it kind of it almost becomes like milestones in my life, and I think it has as a cultural product, it has greater significance than, you know. Do you remember the time when an iPhone would get released?
Yeah.
And whatever that conference is called that they do, where they would show them, people would actually like sort of want to watch it and be like, "This is groundbreaking."
Oh, the Apple Munich rally.
Let's start a putsch towards Korea and the Samsung enemy within. And at that time, it was like, you know, it felt like each product was a real step forward technologically, culturally. You could say the same about I don't know, musical releases, films, certainly games, where other than, you know, sports games obviously come out every season, but even things like Call of Duty wasn't fully into its production cycle that it's in now, whereas, you know, one for every Christmas. And GTA, because it's so massive, and I think Rockstar rightly spent a lot of time thinking about it, advancing it, getting it right, it means that my life is kind of punctuated by the games.
Quite nicely.
Like, you know, being a sort of like in year 7, GTA San Andreas and this insane game where, you know, you can run around with like a double-ended dildo and batter people with it, and you're like, as a 12-year-old boy, you're like, oh, this is so bad.
This is high art.
Put it in, hang it in the Louvre. Why hasn't this won the Turner Prize?
You understanding the Turner Prize as a 12-year-old. Also, a bed. A shark. You can't play that, shark.
And then, 4 is like 6th form, bunking off school to play it. 5, uni and a bit of an adult, and now 6 as like a grown man. It's almost like sort of...
That's a huge jump between 5 and 6 in terms of
it is.
responsibilities.
I think it is. Yeah, I mean, a lot changes, I guess. Yeah, you're just sort of becoming more of a teenager throughout the early parts of that. But it really does kind of, fond memories like my mates getting stoned as a fucking young adult, like all of it. It just, I think it's like a weird thing that as culture has flattened, that it still retains like a degree of significance or like hype. And I wonder if there's something in that for people sort of planning product launches and all the rest of it in the future. But yeah, holds a fond place in my heart, GTA. I have to play it.
Yeah.
I have to play it.
I suppose it's one of those events. It's like, it's one of those cultural events that doesn't need to promote itself. You know when like Beyonce drops an album and just drops it because it's Beyonce and she knows that she'll get millions and billions of listens.
Yeah. I have no doubt it'll be the highest grossing game of all time when it comes out. It will be massive. Why are we talking about GTA?
Because that boy posted person, I don't know the vendor. So rude. Okay. Someone posted Mario Kart meme.
Child.
Okay, well, no, sorry. Okay. Venn diagram, one of our listeners posting about Mario Kart. Educated guess, I think you're probably a bloke, but if I've misgendered you, I apologise profusely.
No, that I did see that. I approved it, but I haven't seen any of the comments underneath it. Majority of my engagement with social media on PoliticsJOE content has just been checking in on my Twitter to see that my mentions are still a dumpster fire.
Yeah.
After talking about Ballymena the other day.
Mine are just bad in general.
Yeah.
Mine are like people are just calling me gay and the R word whenever I tweet.
Yeah.
It's absolutely insane.
Yeah. Do you get the sort of mocking like Madry, like mate, mate? No, it's just me.
No,
it's
I get
just me.
My trolls are like weird right-wing anon accounts who think I'm trans.
You think you're trans?
They're a bit like someone's like Ed is one of the finest female to male journalists in the UK. They say I'm like, the Twitter did those like Robert Jenner logged me like girlfriend's Netflix account.
Yeah.
They fucking hated that.
Yeah.
And they kept tweeting that like
I've seen a few takes on that.
You're gay, you don't have a girlfriend, you're trans.
Yeah, there was a bit of I just sort of would log in and there'd be someone with a Twitter account that's called something like Morgoth, and it'll be like them quote tweeting a video of me talking and it'll have 500,000 views and sort of be 2,000 words long. And I just go, I better just close that down. Actually, I don't need to read that.
There was someone who made like 45-minute videos about my videos.
Yeah,
that was insane.
Oh yeah, I remember. Yeah, him. That was definitely him.
Yes.
We can be certain about him.
Yeah. Well, if you're watching my video at all,
yeah.
Can I just very quickly address why my hair's wet?
Please. Why is your hair wet?
We didn't have water in my flat this morning, so I had to run here, have a shower here, and I forgot a towel, so that's why my hair is soaking wet.
How did you dry?
Using my gym top, which is now absolutely sodden and just kind of festering in my bag.
You stood in the showers in the changing room, butt naked, still for like 15 minutes, just drying,
trying to create a draft. Lying on it, lying outside in the sun, in the pavement. It's fine.
It's the right day for it. I mean, this weather is extraordinary, isn't it?
Insane.
It's been warm since at least the end of April. We had a couple of weeks where it rained, but it's been sunny for a long time.
Well, there was some quite crucial rain in my life last week, but we'll come to that.
Yeah, we will come to that because you've been in Ballymena, which is the purposes of this episode. Before we do come to the meat of that, though, Edward, the most eagle-eyed observers amongst the audience will have noticed at the end of my little Rachel Reeves monologue when you and Ava were away, I got drunk on power and just podcasted alone. That'll be the next. Who's the guy that wrote? Is it Putnam? Bowling Alone?
Yeah. Podcasting
alone.
Oh my God, that's what it is now.
Yeah.
It's gotten worse since then.
It'll be like a report by the sort of Centre for Justice on like estranged millennial men.
I think that must be, because like the vast majority of podcasts, no one listens to them.
That's true.
So the vast majority of people with a podcast don't have an audience.
Yeah. Someone, when we launched this, someone had a stat. I can't remember who it was. Well, someone was like, how's it going? People listening. And I said, well, we got 2,000 subscribers before we published an episode, so we were quite pleased with that. And he was like, oh, so you're in the top 1% of podcasts? And I was like, what?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Because I think it's something like 99% of them don't have more than 1,000 listens per episode.
Yeah.
I guess it's just a lot of people talking to themselves, which is quite a neat metaphor for the modern day.
Yep.
Yeah. So anyway, at the end of me doing that, what a loser! I did that. I teased the fact that PoliticsJOE Premium is coming. We're
JOEnly Fans.
I prefer that. I do prefer calling it JOEnly Fans, which maybe is what we'll call it.
Maybe. What's another premium product that you pay for? Sky TV.
Sky Joe. Sky Joe TV.
Now TV Joe.
Yeah.
Amazon Fire Stick Joe.
Which is good. So I would like to spend a couple of minutes talking about that, if we may, Ed. I mean, I think probably by the end of this process, people may get a little bit sick of hearing ad reads at the beginning and end of the podcast. But if we can just bludgeon into them that we'd quite like their support, I think that would make a big difference. Make a big difference to us. So, yeah, patreon.com/PoliticsJOE. You can get exclusive content. We'll do some live streams, Q&As, group chat, and I think probably most crucially, because we're going to start doing live events again, the people that subscribe will get first dibs to those tickets. We will offer it to them first. I don't think, whereas last time, we did a theatre and 500 odd people came, I'm inclined to do something that's a little bit more personal.
More intimate.
Yeah, that's the right way of putting it.
Yeah,
more intimate. I think kind of like a big room above a pub, and then we all get on the pints afterwards is more our vibe. I did enjoy doing the theatre.
It's more tenable because just from like a personal health point of view.
Emotional stress.
No, emotional stress, that's a different... I don't really want to tell them about that. But
no, I was emotionally stressed by doing it.
But like the amount of pints I was given afterwards, if there's a fifth of the amount of people there, that is far fewer pints than I was so drunk, I didn't go for dinner with my family. I stayed drinking with the listeners.
If you ever doubt this man's commitment, because his family live in Scotland.
Yep.
Thanks for coming down, Mum and Dad. I'm staying here.
Yeah. Well, I would have been rotten company at dinner.
Yeah, it wouldn't be great.
I think it was maybe their decision rather than my decision, I guess.
Yeah, but it was, I don't know. I sometimes, when you're like lying in bed and you can't get to sleep and you just start thinking about things.
Yes.
Something that I often return to is that show.
Yeah.
And the comparatively little preparation that we put into
anything.
Well, yeah, anything, fine.
Anything about that, we worked very hard on lots of things, but there was a general election on.
Yeah. But I think maybe we spent 10 minutes talking about what we were going to do.
Mm-hmm. It wasn't clear to me till the day.
Yeah.
I was at Glastonbury, to be fair. I came back from Glastonbury. But if you want to have first dibs on watching me and Ollie crash out in front of an audience...
Well, no, that's the thing that I think about often is like, maybe we are. Maybe what we do is actually quite good because we didn't really prepare, and it went down quite well.
It did.
People laughed.
People were watching football in the front row.
Yeah, they were. That was good.
In addition.
Anarchic. No, I like that. But anyway, I don't think it was too stressful. It didn't really latch onto me at the time because, on the day there was actually a strong suspicion from me and my wife that we may potentially be having our daughter that day.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that. That'd have been insane.
Transpired that we weren't, but we did wonder if we were. And so I wasn't really thinking about the podcast.
No, so fair.
So I just sort of turned on and was like, right. And then I got there and was like, oh, fuck.
And so from my perspective, I would have argued that I would have thought it was your job to decide that. Obviously, in the context. But having been at Glastonbury for like 3 or 4 days with no contact, arriving at the theatre, so what are we going to do?
And you're about as prepared as everybody else
Yeah.
was. Yeah, exactly. So that was quite stressful.
Yes.
With hindsight, I didn't feel it at the time. Well, I was stressed at the time, but I think I was attributing my stress to other things that are happening in my life. So I think sort of on a more chilled out perspective, I'd be very happy to just kind of,
hang out.
Retreat a little bit to just doing the rooms above pubs or small theatres.
Leicester Square Theatre would be a good one.
What capacity is that?
I'd say 200, 300.
Yeah, I think that's
Bill
ballpark
Murray.
what we want. Yeah, so look, that would imply then, if 500 people bought tickets to that one, that if we offered them out to those 500 people and they all signed up, you wouldn't be general admission wouldn't even be a thing. Mm-hmm. You wouldn't even get a chance. Mm-hmm. So if you want live tickets to live events, you're going to have to sign up. Patreon.com/PoliticsJOE. I think the reason I wanted to talk about it now is like to give it like a bit more context. I think a bit more of a perspective, because I appreciate something that I really have gone back and forth about thinking about doing this is it's all fun and games we make content that people like, but it's a very different ask, and this might be a bit meta now talking to the audience about like publishing strategy and stuff, but it's a very different ask to be like, this thing is interesting and funny and you can have it for free, versus please support us financially so that we can carry on making that stuff, is a very different ask. And not only because, well, you sort of think, if you believe that what we're publishing serves some public value, which I do, I'm sort of loath to then make stuff that only lives behind a paywall and people can't see elsewhere. So like figuring that out is quite tricky.
But I guess you've got to talk about it in this like digital media landscape. I think it's anything successful or that has any sort of potential longevity or long-term strategy does have a freemium model.
Yeah.
As well. Like if you look at like Business Insider has laid off or made a lot of people redundant recently, including people who are behind like incredibly successful video formats. Yeah. It's crazy. Vox Media, I think, sold Polygon, their gaming channel, which had like a cult following recently, and I think that's going to look entirely different. So it's about also ensuring the longevity of PoliticsJOE as a format and making sure that we are able to continue to do this.
Yeah, for sure. It's not just sort of the editorial side as well. Like, media agencies across the city, waves of redundancies right now. Like, it is hard. And I think
the microphone fell down for the listener. There we are.
It's such a neat metaphor, isn't it? For impotence.
Tell you what, we could get new mic stands.
We could. Or we could just tighten them up, when we use them. Look, I think, from a publisher's perspective, if you're in a position where, let's say, more than 50% of your revenue comes from a single stream, that might be a certain platform. So it could be Facebook or YouTube. It might be audio revenue on a podcast or subscription. Subscriptions actually probably not. Or let's say website programmatic advertising, right? You're kind of in quite a vulnerable position to external forces. So let's say 90% of your revenue comes from YouTube, and then the YouTube algorithm undergoes a pretty substantial change. And let's say I don't know, you're a political creator and YouTube decides to deprioritize political content in its recommendations, etc. And your traffic, I don't know, let's say reduces by 50%, and as a result, your revenue halves. So unless you're operating at a margin of more than 50%, you're now a loss-making exercise. And so it's a very dangerous place to be. The only real organizations that I think are insulated from shocks like that are people that have pretty solid subscriber bases. Because it means that, extraneous of algorithm changes, etc., people can obviously subscribe, unsubscribe as they see fit, but you essentially protect yourself from some of those other taps getting turned off. And that's sort of partially the rationale for us doing this.
Mm-hmm. There's other quality journalism that we all pay for.
Oh, for sure.
As well. I pay for the Times, the New York Times, the Fence.
Yeah. I still get the Times. Should I say this?
No. You actually shouldn't.
I have access to the Times.
Uh-huh.
I pay for the Fence. I think I'm going to restart my New Statesman subscription. I buy the FT Weekend.
Yeah. I have access to the FT.
Yeah.
That's the only two subscriptions you need is the FT and PoliticsJOE. You're kind of covered.
We do the markets, they do the gas.
To be fair, that's what I think.
No, I do pay for it, but it's also like... in these days, these times whereby, you know, a pint costs in central London between, well, quite often north of £7. I don't think it's too much to ask. You know, basically say, do you think this thing is valuable? If so, would you mind paying less than an hour's minimum wage for it once a month?
Yeah, and also if you think
it's like the equivalent of buying Ed a pint.
Yes, and
buy Ed a pint.
And that's what will happen. You see me gradually put on weight.
It's like the end of the live show.
Yeah,
every new Patreon, we put a pint on Ed's desk.
Oh my God. Remember when we used to drink beer on this podcast? That was awful.
Every day. I had a whiskey. I had an Irish coffee.
We crushed G&Ts once.
Suella resigned.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think there's points we made as well about like the other sort of political content that is big at the moment is just like some of the most racist, fascist, far right content, and that is like algorithmically being brought to the forefront, and that you're getting that for free. And if you want our stuff to sort of try and beat that noise, then this is a pretty good way to help us do that.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Otherwise, we're going to have to start doing. We will pivot to far right content.
I'm this close. I'm going to change our Twitter handle to Morgoth Joe. Politics Morgoth will be a thing.
This pertains to not Ballymena, but the Witch Festival I was at on Saturday.
You've been working hard, man.
I know. I've had really little sleep recently. And that will be addressed in my tribunal. I was kind of reading about paganism and the revival of like English paganism in the UK. And I read an article, it was an interesting article about this guy's like personal relationship with paganism, and saying like he worships like Thor and like goes into his like kind of meditates in nature. And it said he was a YouTuber. It looked him up. I think he's a Nazi. I was like, oh fuck. Shit. Oh, you've made a YouTube video saying, are black people British?
Right.
I do think you might be a Nazi.
There is a strange confluence, isn't there, of kind of wellness, druidic, hippie people beliefs, and like blood and soil nationalism.
Yeah, I must say none of that was present at the Witch Festival I was at on Saturday.
White witches, I think, weren't they, at the Witch Festival? The good kind.
No, there was people of colour too.
Fuck. He's had me.
You walked into that one.
No, there's white witches. There's white witches and black witches, as I understand it.
There's tons of colours.
Oh, really?
Someone's like, I'm a green witch. I came in with more questions than
she smokes a little
answers.
Aretha.
But
are they all she's? No.
All witches?
Yeah.
There was some wizards.
Or are you like a wizard if you're a man?
There were some wizards there. I don't know. I think maybe like.
What's the distinction?
You could describe yourself as a witch, but maybe it depends. I guess it depends on your like gender identity or like.
That's what I'm saying. Does your gender identity dictate whether you're a witch or a wizard, or is there like a sort of shamanistic distinction?
But people were describing themselves as shamans, as fairies, like as mediums, as animalists, as. You need to open your mind. I had a life-changing experience Saturday. Didn't I, Ben?
Oh yeah.
It was Ben shot it. First venture into shooting for Ben. Not ever, but with PoliticsJOE. We had a great time. We had a lovely time in Milton Keynes.
So let's run. So we'll walk it back. So that's how you spent your Saturday.
Yes.
In Milton Keynes at the Witch Convention.
Yes.
at the Witan, perhaps we'll call it. And then
the Witan?
Yeah.
What's that?
It's the mechanism by which the aldermen of medieval England, when the king died, they would sort of convene the Witan. It's like a council.
Right.
Discussion of matters of state.
Okay.
You know, you'd have localized ones and there'd be big ones as well.
Right.
So I don't know. Let's say the line of succession of a king was in dispute. The Witan would be convened. So,
and you're suggesting they're all witches?
No, it's just I thought it was a sort of ye olde sounding word
Right.
to describe. I don't want to call it a convention. You know, which convention, which expo?
A coven.
That's probably it.
That's probably
covenant. Coven.
Coven.
It is a coven of witches, isn't it?
It's a crucible.
Yeah. So anyway, that was Saturday. What time did you arrive in Milton Keynes? What time did you leave to go to Milton Keynes?
10:30.
Okay.
10:30.
And what time had you got in the night before?
1 o'clock in the morning.
Because you had been in
Belfast, and my flight had been heavily delayed. And before that, I was in Ballymena.
Here we go.
So
the meat of the episode. What do we make this? Half an hour in?
Yes.
I think we should maybe start time coding it. Someone did actually.
No, they do it. They do it. No. We're not bowing to them.
Ed.
You know the people that comment like, the episode starts here. It's not for you.
Someone.
No, new listeners.
No. When I trailed the Patreon, someone did comment and say, "I will subscribe if you start time coding."
That's
the
one
episodes.
person.
Yeah, actually, that would be a 100% increase because we do have one subscriber.
Yes.
So, Chris Smith.
We're doxing Smith.
I think he's safe. I think his name is pretty.
In honor of.
If it was like Keir Starmer, who might have a clue who it is, but no, your man Chris Smith. I didn't even when I teased it. I didn't even say where it was. I didn't give the URL. I didn't say what
How the
platform
hell
it
could he work that?
Well, he's found it anyway. So we got our first. Thank you, Chris.
I think
God bless you.
We should refer to the audience as Chris now. That's how much we hold this man in regard.
We hold him in very high regard.
The audience is Chris.
I suppose it could be a woman. It was CHRIS.
But it's a listener of this podcast, so seems unlikely.
Odds are low.
Odds on. Ballymena. Picture this. Thursday. Me, Robbie from the Dublin office. He picks me up from Belfast International Airport. We drive half an hour into Ballymena. And we arrive in Ballymena and we drive past some of the damage and we are out loud shouting, Jesus fucking Christ, this is insane. It's one thing like reading about all of this or seeing the images, but seeing it in person is actually one of the most staggering things I've done probably in this job, like be in that environment.
So tell me more about that then. So what, like burnt out car, burnt out buildings?
Burnt out houses. There were Union Jack stickers on probably every house in those areas. Some had like Filipino flags on them because they wanted to make the distinction that they were Filipino, not Romanian. There was a sign we saw that said Nepalese Gurkha lives here, Filipino family with one child lives here to try and like ward off rioters. There was, it was just kind of, the streets sort of around the town were pretty empty. I don't know how busy Ballymena is in normal times, but totally anecdotally, I have a friend who works in Ballymena, doesn't live there. And she said her team had just not been going to the office that week. There was an atmosphere, it seemed like something, very obvious something bad had happened there. It was like kind of hanging in the air.
What has gone wrong where people, like literally the equivalent of kind of like marking a red X on a door, you know, being like, no, I am a local and I love it here and please don't firebomb my house, you know?
Yeah, and also as well, kind of the crux of the reporting was there wasn't a riot in Ballymena on Thursday because there was torrential rain. Like, I was absolutely soaked through, sort of just hanging about with, there was like a group of kids there, like some teenagers who were kind of hanging around in case something happened. There was like quite a large like riot police presence and some sort of like suspicious looking middle-aged men on bikes who seem to be keeping some sort of lookout, I would say.
When you say bikes,
like mountain bikes, like what business does a middle-aged man have sitting on a mountain bike on the pavement, unless you're perhaps you're serving some sort of other function in that environment. And there wasn't a riot, but if there had been, there were so many sort of Union Jacks everywhere that it was quite obvious that, because given like the demographics in that area, Ballymena, there was more Union Jacks than there were like British households, essentially. So had there been a riot, I don't think that would have warded people off necessarily, because it was quite obvious that families who were not of like an Ulster extract were also using that to kind of hide their demeanour.
I mean, I was looking at the stats over the weekend, and Northern Ireland is the least ethnically diverse place in the UK.
It's 3% non-white.
Yeah, something like that. Maybe touching 4%, but it's sort of between 3 and 4% non-white, and compared to a sort of 15-20% for England and the country at large, and obviously it changes city, rural, etc. So it's like it's that's interesting for two reasons. One, because we're all familiar with the studies that show that the less immigration there is to a place, the more hostile the attitudes of that place towards immigrants. And once you live near people that have arrived here and you meet them and you spend time with them, you realise, you're just a normal person, and my xenophobia is perhaps irrational. But the other angle of that then is that there's actually not that many. I was looking at sort of census data and breakdowns of sort of the local area, and there aren't actually that many. Once you've started firebombing, you sort of, there's only so many people you can firebomb in Connavan Terrace before you start running out of houses to firebomb. What was it when you were speaking to people there, trying to understand like why it had happened beyond the short-term trigger of the alleged sexual assault? What sort of things were people saying to you?
So the main thing that was coming up was the alleged sexual assault. And actually one really interesting thing that one girl said was that essentially men had it coming. As in, the extent of sexual violence in Northern Ireland is such that like something like this was bound to happen. And I'm not sure that I think her logic doesn't quite work, because
so what was the logic? Sorry,
the logic was that this is the latest man to have done something atrocious, and
possibly,
excuse me, yes, and therefore retribution was taken. It kind of, her argument doesn't really hold up, I guess, because like it was the ethnicity of this person that triggered such a reaction, but there was like a real anger on behalf of the victim of this alleged assault, and it was the locals' understanding was that it did seem to be about that, and there was also discussion about like a lack of integration on behalf of certain communities in Ballymena. One woman I spoke to, Demi, said she was talking about kind of the socioeconomic context of Ballymena, about these people have like been left behind, and she she was making the point that people are only focusing on the rioting and the burning and not the larger issues at hand in Ballymena. But you do say to that, well, they are burning down the houses of immigrants. Like, you'd have to be like quite, I don't know, extremely like hand-wringing to be like, well, we do need to think about their economic opportunities and forgive them for their burning and rioting, of course.
Productivity growth has been anemic in Ballymena.
But like, Ballymena is like a formerly pretty well-off town that's not done brilliantly in recent years. So like, there is some like frustration in that regard, and there is just, I guess, the sense that a shared ground across the UK. It's not a specific to Northern Ireland thing that, or even to Britain, that immigrants can come here and get ahead. And it's what I was maybe struck by was how not unique this seems to me. Like it doesn't. People are talking about sort of the Northern Irish context, but I think you actually literally could put this in any part of the UK.
Yeah.
Like the one thing with the Northern Irish context is the sort of like the reflex to riot. Like that is like street violence is kind of endemic in like Northern Irish political culture, isn't it?
Yeah.
And what was also I did one, but
I mean, English people still don't realise there are like parts of Belfast where there are walls, and at night the gates get locked. So if you wanted to go from one street to the next, you would have to drive all the way around, and people throw bricks and firebombs over the top of those walls at each other.
Yeah, and the one thing that I did think was like, if this was in the UK, and we saw kind of after Southport, there was counter-protests, like anti-racist, anti-fascist counter-protests, and I wondered if there would be the same in Ballymena, and I didn't see that.
You mean in mainland Britain, right?
Sorry, yes.
Famously is part of the UK.
Yes, excuse me.
But I know what you meant.
But whereas, and I wonder if that's because they realise that shit gets quite real in riots in Northern Ireland. They are used to that. There's like petrol bombs being thrown, whereas in like Southport and in whatever it's. Like,
I guess it would just revert to sort of sectarian violence, just a couple of kneecappings maybe or something like that. I want to talk about both things you said. I'm going to come back to that. You could transpose that into any other town in the UK, and it's this point about. Demi saying to you that people are disregarding or not paying enough attention to the context in which this is happening, and it's it's a sort of increasingly common and possibly defining characteristic of extremist politics now, not just the right, also on the left. It's this paradox where they'll kind of, if I could summarize it in a sentence, it would be that this comment you will see on journalism, when we make journalism like this, you'll often see a comment, people say, not far right, just right. And it's essentially a kind of minimization of the horror, the violence, the race rioting, and essentially say, like, are they not right to be angry? And the paradox of it is no one would really be talking about, like, they've because they have rioted, it is now relevant. People are talking about it. There's more of a news peg for media to cover it, etc. Rather than, as brutal and horrific it is, national media doesn't necessarily always lead with coverage of sexual assault. It's like minimize this massive thing because we want to talk about this issue, but the only reason we're talking about it is because of the massive thing. And so you see the same thing with kind of people's conduct on pro-Palestine marches. It's sort of this like, I just want to talk to you about the issue at hand, that I want to discount, people are firebombing houses over here, but actually the far more important thing, I care deeply about what's sort of happening, this sexual assault that happened. Or if you were to turn it into like a foreign policy and conflict, it would be like, someone, I don't know, someone who sort of supports the manner in which Israel is conducting its war in the Middle East, and be like, I know that sort of, nearly 100% of the buildings in Gaza have been flattened, more than 50,000 people have been killed, but the horror of October 7th was absolutely atrocious. And it's this kind of the duality of thinking that, the way that I am aggrieved, and I think this is a product actually of sort of the increasing sort of gravity of and importance of individualism, and like what you have experienced and the trauma that you have undergone is so important that whatever anyone else is experiencing is minimized in relation to it. So, okay, I don't want to sort of enter into like a utilitarian calculation of like what the most trauma that can be caused by various horrific acts, but 3 or 4 consecutive nights of rioting in Northern Ireland, because Ballymena, it got rained off, and then in Larne, a leisure centre there got firebombed because a unionist, actually it was the communities minister in Stormont, decided that it would be an appropriate thing to tell his followers on social media that people who were being temporarily housed outside of Ballymena were in a leisure centre in Larne.
Yeah, and he objected to it because it was in his constituency.
And so the leisure centre then gets firebombed.
Yep. by like, and there's videos on social media of. The thing is, it's also crazy that it's kids. It's like teenagers.
There are children there.
It's teenagers. It's kind of exclusively teenagers.
Yeah.
Like, and it's like a girl filming it, shouting, "Get them! Get the p words out, foreigners out!" All this. It's like some of them like just hateful language. It's just totally shocking.
Yeah. And so it's like that the assault is horrific. How many houses are we going to firebomb before we start going?
Yeah.
You know, you sound like you're sort of playing word games here, but it's like, and the empathy and the horror and your alleged upset at this thing happening. Do you not have the sort of like one iota of empathy to be able to recognize that what you are now doing is possibly on a grander scale more traumatic for far many more people than the disgusting thing that's already happened? And that's kind of what I'm talking about with this sort of like, oh well, I've been wrong, so now I'm going to burn down this row of terraced houses. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
You know, it's like that. Do you remember, what's that? When the Americans like bombed their own city because there were like black radicals in
Oklahoma City, Tulsa. I think it was Tulsa.
Tulsa. They literally like dropped someone. They flew over in a helicopter and like dropped C4 on a block of flats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was one woman I was speaking to who she was talking about like the riots that had gone on previously and speaking about sort of like the Filipino families whose houses had been firebombed, and she was kind of suggesting that they should have to understand that they weren't being targeted and that they'd be sorted out. It's like, well, there's still the houses were burnt down.
Yeah.
They'd be absolutely terrified. Like, how can they feel safe in that
with their children
community? Yeah. Like, but there wasn't even like a sense of empathy for that person. It was like her rage was so great that it sort of blinded her to empathy for anyone in that situation whose house would be. She just saw them as like legitimate collateral damage. It's probably the fairest way to say that. Yeah,
and I guess that's where you start thinking about Northern Ireland's history of division and history of sectarian violence. There's sort of not random, but the targeting of civilians, right, by paramilitaries from either side, and then revenge killings or revenge kneecappings in return. That you sort of start thinking about, okay, how much of this is. I guess this is a way to move on to our conversation about whether you could transpose this into another part of the United Kingdom, is like that attitude of, well, you know, they'll get sorted out and this is kind of part of the course of what happens. Is that because the place has a history of, yeah, okay, Ed did get kneecapped, but we'll kneecap one of them next week. So it's by the by, it's, you know, swings and roundabouts. I don't know. Yeah, okay, so can you transpose it to another? Because I am increasingly of the view that you can.
Yeah, 100%.
I think previously, certainly, you know, over recent decades, rioting in Northern Ireland would actually, to be honest with you, would barely make the sort of 10 o'clock news, right? It's like, it's almost expected. Beyond...
Well, the unionists are annoyed about Brexit, so they're rioting. That was the attitude.
They tried to kind of galvanise sort of political opposition to that, and it didn't really make a splash with the whole sort of Windsor framework, etc., trade barrier down the Irish Sea type stuff. But certainly, you know, in the 80s and 90s, the view from the mainland would be like this sort of not out of the ordinary. Huh. But I think this is different, and for me, it's because the kind of the media diet of the people that were race rioting in Ballymena and the people that were race rioting here in the UK over the last summer, and genuinely, we're not that far away. I think we're really on the edge of it just widespread, and that kind of political violence, identitarian violence, is just under the surface, I think. I think we are one appalling crime away from that being the spark that ignites the powder keg, in the way that Southport was, in the way that, you know, this alleged assault was. It's sort of like this flattening where everyone is in the same Telegram channels, right? And previously, this strange phenomenon actually, where like the English and Irish far right are kind of both imbibing sort of Tommy, Conor McGregor.
It's nativism, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like they accept that the Irish are native to Ireland and that Brits are native to Britain. Obviously, Northern Ireland is where that gets super. I don't know if you've heard of the Troubles, guys, but it got super tricky out there.
Yeah.
But there's like a shared understanding of like, oh, you're white, that's your bit. We're white, that's our bit, and that's like a shared goal. There's also now a template for this kind of rioting, and I'm not even sure that you do need an inciting incident.
Really?
Like, so you've got a template now of after. So there's violence in Ballymena, violence in Larne. There's a copycat kind of rioting in Portadown, which may be an hour south of Ballymena, and that was they were just having a protest in quotation marks, and then they were just rioting against the police. I'm not actually sure if kind of immigrants were targeted in the same way that they were in Ballymena, but that's all you need now. All you need is a protest, wink, and people know exactly what they're going to turn up to do. Say, for example, there was a protest in Whitechapel, perhaps, or like an area with really high, really obvious immigration, and you get a lot of concerned citizens there. They've been given almost permission by their fellow travellers to kind of take it to the next level.
Yeah, I actually genuinely don't think they would march through Whitechapel. You know, back in the day,
Like the 70s.
those like early Tommy EDL marches where they would go through East London. I don't think they would now.
Or somewhere like Leicester, or somewhere like Bradford, or some.
I genuinely think they'd be bit at risk of getting their heads kicked in.
I'm sure they would, but they're probably at risk of that.
Do you remember?
I mean, as well.
What march was it? Was it you and me were at? And then when it was during COVID, and when the far right lot were done drinking tins and pissing on Parliament Square, as they all sort of in dribs and drabs made their way to like Waterloo or wherever, they were then all getting jumped.
Oh yeah,
on the way in between. I think that this is a brief aside from me, but I think I interviewed Tom McTague last week. He did like this big profile of Starmer, and to draw a connection between these two things. The piece is quite interesting and perceptive because it basically positions Starmer as actually he's a bit of an older man. He's in his 60s. You know, he's the age of our dads basically. And when you think about men of that generation and their capacity to articulate their feelings, communicate emotionally. And it's not as simplistic as saying, "Oh, Starmer's old." Like the piece covers sort of the trauma that he's experienced through his life, his conflicted relationship with his parents, and his inability to articulate how he feels. Which, if you were to think about, okay, so the country seems poised on a sort of knife edge for sectarian, identitarian, nationalist violence, and I don't just mean English, British. Like, you know, I think there is a world in which we see like Pakistani, Indian sectarian violence happening in the UK, for example, and others. There are many others, and you kind of go, okay, figurehead politician could possibly tell some kind of story about where we are as a country and how to get, like, in the same way that political figureheads are whipping up this hatred and violence, it is possible that other political figures can put pseudocreme on it, you know? And yes, I have reached for that as an example, as the father of a baby. I can't think something soothing, something cooling.
Aloe vera.
Yeah, aloe vera.
Yeah.
Who is the aloe vera politician?
Who's the menthol cigarette of politicians?
But Starmer can't spell it. Do you know what I mean? he almost certainly can spell aloe vera. But you see what I'm saying? Like, because he can't tell a story, because he can't verbalize, because he can't put the words to how the country is feeling. And in theory, he should be able to, because he's a traumatized man and the country is traumatized as well. In theory, it's actually kind of ironic that he's unable to sort of knit the two things together into a compelling political narrative. And so you're sort of led to think that it's just going to get worse, particularly because his reflexive way of dealing with this stuff in the past has always been an authoritarian one. You know, whether it's the London riots, whether it was the Southport riots, it's throw the book at them quick, restore order on the streets. And, okay, short term, kind of works. You get a ton of people accusing you of two-tier policing and a sort of double-tier justice system. And then your police forces start announcing the ethnic identity of white perpetrators. Mm-hmm. Interestingly, with what's alleged to have happened in Ballymena, there's been this kind of wink and a nod where they haven't outright said the ethnic identity of the people who are accused of mm-hmm. the assault. They've said that the charges were read to them by a Romanian interpreter, mm-hmm. which one assumes means they're either Romanian or possibly like Roma. Mm-hmm. But it's not like outright. It's kind of, and this, I think they've made a bit of a rod for their own backs with that.
There's a couple of things I'd like to touch on as well from Ballymena.
Yeah.
In that the areas that the riots were happening, it was impossible for me to get someone there to speak to me.
Right.
Like to actually speak to media.
On camera or?
At all.
At all.
They were, on camera, a couple of people were quite generous with their time. Not so generous to extend to an interview, but I appreciate that. But there is like a sense of being scared of your neighbours because of
what's happening.
What everyone knows about sort of communities in Northern Ireland and who kind of controls those sort of areas. They didn't want to face any backlash from sort of speaking out of turn, and some people have been very brave in speaking out against it to other outlets. Some people speaking to me. But we saw Stephen Nolan walking around the area with a microphone, and he then tweeted saying not a single person would speak to me because they say mainstream media doesn't give them a voice. Here I was literally extending the opportunity to give them a voice. And that's the sort of distrust people have in the mainstream media now that we have to contend with. One woman said journalists are abysmal. They've said we're all racist. It's absolutely abysmal. And I actually kind of thought about that. I was kind of under the impression only the rioters were racist. That's what kind of the media narrative has been. But she took it to be that everyone in that area had been racist. I guess if she supports the rioters, that's the inference she would take. So there is just like this incredibly difficult challenge for people like in the media about how do you serve people in those sorts of audience. Like you have to try and undo the legacy of distrust in the media and then work even harder, work double hard to build that back up. Yeah.
I think it's institutional. Mm-hmm. It's not just the media, it's the police. You know, the fucking head of PSNI is like, this is racist thuggery. Mm-hmm. Because that's what it is. It's so hard though, because she thinks that. She does not believe that what's happening is racist. Mm-hmm. And it's when you sort of logically go, okay, I said this on the last pod, but the stats on violence against women and girls in Northern Ireland are appalling.
Yeah, sure.
Like appalling. Mm-hmm. It is sort of omnipresent. And so when you have all of this abuse and a great deal of it is perpetrated by men that the women know, and you're not marching on the fucking wherever it is in Ballymena that the loyalists hang out, right? Because some white middle-aged bloke has killed his wife, let's say. And if you don't march on where he likes to hang out and you don't firebomb his house or the people that look like him's house, but you wait until someone of a different ethnic minority does, and then you start rioting, what conclusion? Like, that's not we have legitimate concerns about immigration. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. It's like I'm sure there are people who are very, very perturbed by this. There are people who are sort of like not prejudiced, don't have a prejudice bone in their body and are upset by this. I'm upset by it. Mm-hmm. But genuinely, she's not doing that to be dishonest. You know, I think there are people who communicate online about this stuff that are doing so in bad faith. I don't think she, or indeed I'm sure there are plenty of other people like her in Ballymena who maybe aren't rioting, but thinking this isn't a racist thing to do. Like, how do you bridge that gap? Because that's it's like a yawning chasm.
But then I think is it impossible? Because like,
yeah, possibly.
Like,
yeah.
It's two parallel thoughts, and people are finding it increasingly difficult to hold them. Like, that's an appalling crime. You shouldn't burn down people's houses because they're immigrants. I think that's quite easy to hold those two thoughts in your mind, but it's been knitted together and twisted. On your point about violence against women and girls, did you see the video of people, like rioters chucking stones at windows, and they're trying to reach the top window, which seems to belong to the house of an immigrant, and they hit the bottom window, which has a Union Jack in it, and people go, "Oh, why have you done that?" That is across the road from a pub with a banner dedicated to Chloe Mitchell, who's a woman in Ballymena who was murdered by her boyfriend. It is literally like within, if the rioters had turned around, they would be able to see it. It's like there's memorials to Chloe all over Ballymena. Like that, the memory of sort of violence against women and girls and like the victims does loom large in the town. And some of the women I spoke to did suggest that they've tried the peaceful protests about this. They're still trying to attach the narrative like this is about women and girls to these riots. It's not just the opportunity for a riot. I know the riots themselves, actually. I spoke to a young guy, Morgan, he's a great guy, part-time DJ. I think he's about 18 years old. And we're talking about kind of like the rioters, or kind of about lads about his age, maybe slightly younger. And he was like, if I was 15, I probably would have been out.
Yeah.
You just copycat. It just looks like a laugh. Just the joy of wanton destruction. He certainly saw the appeal in that. And I said, but he was on the way. He had no way, nothing to do with the riots. He was on the way to his job in like a kebab shop. And I said, what would you tell those lads now? And he's like, wise up. Which was great.
Yeah. I guess it's a I wouldn't say widely held, but certainly it is a political position that a lot of people have from traditions of both left and right, that like rioting is an acceptable form of protest. If you have exhausted non-violent options, then violent ones become the only ones that remain, right? But you can't apply it in this instance, because it's like the reason it's happening is because of the racial component. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's
if they'd burned down the house of every man in Ballymena, then you'd be like, well, this is the reaction to the endemic systematic violence against women and girls in Northern Ireland.
But this is the problem.
Yeah,
it's like in possibly 100%, but certainly 99%, let's say 98%, the perpetrator is a man.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So it's like if you want to extrapolate a conclusion about a group based on who it is that's committing against violence against women and girls, it's men. And yeah, it blows my mind, because if I wanted to create like a safer environment for women and girls on the streets of my town, I can't see how throwing Molotov cocktails and rioting makes them feel safer. You know, and certainly from what I've seen of those crowds,
forcing women from the home.
Yeah, it's blokes out doing it. It's like, oh yeah, I'm sure a woman would love to walk through that crowd.
We met a guy helping his mother-in-law move from the area. She was coming to stay with them in Belfast for a few nights until it all blew up. She didn't feel safe anymore. So women fleeing Ballymena as a result.
But like you said, right, you're there, torrential downpour, and so everyone goes, yeah,
I'm not that feminist.
Yeah, not that much of a feminist.
I'm not that much of a feminist.
My feminism's come out in the wash.
And there hasn't been violence since then. I think it completely halted the momentum of the riots. I actually do think if it had rained, there would have been. Excuse me, if it hadn't rained, there would have been more violence.
But I mean, but that's what lends the argument then to it's just people going out looking for a tear up and looking to basically like doing it for a laugh. It's the same. The crime stats in London when it's hot, when there are hot evenings, skyrocket. It's like way more dangerous.
Do you have any final questions?
I genuinely could talk about this all day with you, Ed, but I would just say to people that they're going to have to wait for your dispatch
Yes.
For your piece, which will be on the Politics Show YouTube channel. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for your journalism. Thank you for working so hard. You'll need to get some sleep in the near future.
Yes, I think so. I watched 28 Days Later last night.
Any good?
Have you never seen it?
No, I haven't watched any of it. It's one of those series, where you have it like in your head. You're like, that franchise, I should really watch that.
I really, really enjoyed it. There's an actress whose name I don't know because she didn't act in anything else after this, gives one of the worst performances of all time. She plays Hannah. I'm happy going on record. It's one of the most truly dreadful performances of all. Because
I thought the film was going to be quite good.
No, they are. It's directed really well. It's really interestingly.
Despite Hannah's performance.
Hannah's performance does knock it down maybe half a star, I would say. But Cillian Murphy's great. Brendan Gleeson's great in it. Christopher Eccleston.
Imagine my shock.
Tremendous cast. Directed by Danny Boyle. What more could you want from a picture?
Ed Campbell.
Oli Dugmore.
Been a pleasure. Thank you so much, sir.
And you.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
PoliticsJOE Premium is coming, and we're asking for your help. If you like our journalism and want us to carry on making it, consider supporting us with a subscription for the price of a festival pint once a month. Less than an hour's minimum wage. Head to our Patreon, where you'll get first dibs on live event tickets, access to the PolJOE group chat, Q&As, and exclusive member-only content. Go to patreon.com/PoliticsJOE, where exclusively for you, our pod freaks can use the code POD to get 90% off your first month. That's code POD, P-O-D, for 90% off your first month at patreon.com/PoliticsJOE. Call it JOEnly Fans.